say, welcome to live stream number 8. Today we're going to be talking a bunch about a variety of Mac security topics. We're going to start by briefly looking at a new Mac security bug, not really going into the underlying details, but at least illustrating the problem. We're then going to briefly talk about MRT, which is Apple's malware removal tool, showing kind of some of its capabilities and showing how we can reverse engineer it to discover or uncover new signatures for perhaps malware that the public is not aware of, but that Apple is. And then if we have time, we'll maybe fix some bugs in some of my own tools. There's some feature requests for some users. And then as always, we'll end with a Q&A where you can ask hard questions and Havana will answer all of them. Gamerbot says, will Havana play games one time? I mean, if I let a chicken loose in the office, she will chase it. So maybe we could film that. Although, don't want to upset PETA. Okay, so as always, before I want to dive in, I just briefly want to thank the sponsors, the Friends of Objective-C. These are the companies that sponsor my research, my open source tool development, my blogs, the Objective-C conference. So mad kudos and appreciation to them. Briefly, Digita Security, it's my employer, put up with all my shenanigans, help pay the bills. They're awesome, check them out. Sophos, well-known Mac antivirus product, Clean My Mac, which is created by MacPaw. They make a neat utility that can help optimize your Mac. Malwarebytes, another well-known Mac security antivirus product. And then also SmugMug, who recently bought Flickr, so kudos and thanks to them. The Guardian Mobile Firewall and the Secure Mac. So check these companies out. Uh-oh, I just locked my computer. Awesome. All right, so thanks to them. If you also are interested in perhaps supporting my research and work, I am on Patreon. I am trying to reach 1,000 supporters. So, each and every one really does make a difference and helps me be able to spend more time researching creating tools, researching threats, and basically frees up time because of the support I have. So definitely check me out on Patreon as well. Okay, now that's out of the way, let's first start by looking at a rather interesting and unique Mac security bug that was brought to my attention on Twitter. So let me just click on this tweet and I will post the link here, in here, if you want to check it out as well. And a user, Linus Henze, basically says in his tweet, remember Keychain Stealer by Patrick Wardle, which could steal all your Keychain passwords. While his vulnerability is patched now, I found a new one affecting macOS Mojave and lower. More information can be found in my video. So it's kind of cool. He tagged me. He is alluding to a vulnerability I found in the past where I was able to, without any special permissions, access the keychain. I think I made a video of it. So let's see if I can find that really quick. Post it online. Let me just put this up here. Keychain stealer. No. Maybe I didn't. All right. You can watch me on HBO. We'll save that for later. Okay, so no video here, but basically what the vulnerability I found, as I mentioned, allowed code, malware, and attacker to dump everything that was in the keychain, including passwords, code signing certificate, private keys, everything. So this was very problematic. And the way I did this was basically I requested access to the keychain. This would generate an access prompt, and then I was able to synthetically or programmatically send a programmatic click to the allow prompt, basically giving me access. So Apple tried to protect that prompt from synthetic clicks, but unfortunately their protection, as is often the case, fell short. So I found a way to get around that. And you might think, okay, well, the user is going to notice that, but you could do some tricks like dim the monitor or actually wait until the user was not using their computer. or the display was going to sleep and then trigger the attack, because yes, there was a UI component involved. So if you did it while the user was just sitting there, it'd be kind of obvious, right? You're sitting at your computer and all of a sudden the keychain access prompt pops up and then the mouse moves and it clicks and you're not moving the mouse. Like, okay, your computer's probably hacked. But anyways, as I mentioned, we could do this without the user seeing. So that was great. Reported that to Apple. They patched it. Now when you access the keychain, you always have to put in a password. Even though there's a UI access prompt, you have to put in your password. So that's good. And then in Mojave and above, they kind of re-architected some things to block these synthetic clicks, which is a great idea because using these programmatic or synthetic clicks, you could do a lot to the operating system fully programmatically. You could imagine a tool like Lulu, my firewall, pops up with an alert, blocking some malware that's trying to connect out to the internet that's gotten on a system. Well, if that malware can programmatically interface with that alert, it can just click allow. So being able to synthetically interact with UI components of the operating system is a very powerful technology or technique that malware could abuse. So in Mojave, Apple kind of shut the door on that and basically blocks all synthetic clicks. So kudos to Apple for kind of generically fixing that flaw. Anyways, back to this new bug. It's similar in the sense that it can dump everything on the keychain. So we're going to watch this YouTube video, see if we can watch this online. Wow, this is kind of meta. It's like I'm streaming, but we're watching a video. So it's a little slow at the beginning, and we'll click through some of this. Actually, most of it. Okay, he shows that he's on Mojave 10.14.3, so a fully patched version, the latest version of Mojave with all the patches. He then opens the keychain access prompt. Make sure we can see this okay on the stream. Okay, awesome. And he shows that if he tries to access, for example, his Facebook password, there's an access control, and it's specified to prompt before anybody can access that, which is a good thing, right? These are the default settings. This is protecting that. So now he runs his exploit. And make sure you can see on the screen. I'll move this over a little bit. Well, the video is cut off a little bit. But basically, he's showing that with his exploit, he is able to access the keychain and dump both the username and the password. He then goes back to the keychain just to show that the password he dumped is actually the same one. So we'll just let this catch up for a second. Confirming that. And he's basically saying, that's not his password, but this was demonstration. All right, so we'll exit out of this now. Again, let me just go back a little bit in the video so we can see. Kind of hard to see, but again, confirming that the password that he was able to dump programmatically is the one that indeed is the one in the keychain. So we can see some prompts. Someone from Apple asked, is SIP enabled on the machine? He says yes. Other people ask, is it because of the keychain echoes? He says no. Thomas Reed, who works at Malwarebytes, kudos to them, basically says, the solution for this is to use a different password for your keychain and lock it when not in use. And that's good advice because what normally happens is your keychain, where all your passwords and code signing keys and private certificates and all that are stored, is unlocked with your login password. Now you can set a separate password for that, and if you do that, or if you lock your keychain, it will thwart this attack. So, for example, if we bring up keychain access, you can see my items in my keychain. So in theory, using this attack, he could dump these things. So my code signing certificate for Objective-C, my encryption keys, GitHub access, like really bad stuff, right? So you can lock this, you can click lock keychain, or I think if you do change settings, you can set a new password. The problem is this is annoying because the reason Apple makes it so your keychain is unlocked with your login password is so that it seamlessly interacts with the system. So every time an application wants to access the keychain, if it's allowed to do that. For example, I believe like Slack stores your password in there. And then when Slack starts again, it's allowed to access the Slack password because it stored it in the keychain. The keychain is basically a vault where Apple says you can store trusted, sensitive things in here. In the case of the Slack password, nobody else in theory should be able to access that. So if I write a piece of malware and try to access the keychain and dump the Slack password, I will get an authentication prompt saying, please authenticate, or it might even block me saying, look, you're not Slack doing that. So what this user has found, though, is a very powerful exploit, which is able to access everything in the keychain and dump the passwords. Now, I was lucky enough to actually try this exploit. And so I can confirm that, yes, indeed, it works on the latest version of macOS, fully patched, and can access, for example, the login keychain, the system keychain, and dump everything that's in there, including encrypted passwords, without any special access. You don't have to run this as root or anything. So a very powerful exploit. And unfortunate that Apple's keychain is yet again vulnerable to an attack which allows everything to be dumped. And if I put on my black hat, hacker hat, or pretend I'm a piece of malware, this is the first thing I would do if I got on a Mac system, because if I can access your keychain and dump and exfiltrate all your passwords and your code signing certificates, say if down the road you detect this malware on your system, well, I've already got everything I need, right? If I get your, if you have your email password stored in there, or your social media passwords, or your, private GitHub where all your source code, I mean, this is pretty bad. So someone asked, have you reported this to Apple? There was an article, I believe, written in German, and I Google translated it. He basically said, look, Apple doesn't have a bug bounty program, so there's not really any incentive for me to report that. So we'll see what comes of this bug. But just want to kind of get it on your radar and talk about its impact. That is, it can access sensitive components in your keychain without needing any special prompt. Now, there is an important caveat to this, and that is malware first has to get on your box, right? So this is not a remote attack. So, the risks to the average Mac user is probably small. If malware somehow figures out this same vulnerability, which is possible, and then gets on end user systems, they would be able to dump the password. But again, malware first has to get on your system. And then once it's on your system, it can do this. So this is something that would be in kind of a second stage component of malware, right? Once it's got on your system, first thing I would do is dump and exfiltrate all the keychain data. So again, it's kind of a neat bug by Linus. Kudos to him. And I'm sure in the maybe not too distant future, we will have a blog write-up or some details about this, which we will then rediscuss here, because it's actually a really neat bug. I can't talk about it more at the moment, but from a attacker's point of view, it's kind of sexy. All right, we're now going to switch gears a little bit and talk about MRT. MRT is Apple's malware removal tool. So this is not something they talk about a lot, but built into all modern recent versions of macOS is a utility, a daemon that's always running, and it's Apple's malware removal tool, or MRT. And what it does is it basically scans the system for malware. And if there's malware on your system, like its name implies, malware removal tool, it will remove the malware. So it's interesting because Apple doesn't really talk about this utility. I mean, did any of you, were any of you aware of the fact that your Mac has built-in antivirus? I mean, it's kind of news to me until I found out about it. So really something unusual. Apple, of course, doesn't market this or talk about this a lot because they don't like to discuss malware on their platform. So from a security researcher point of view, MRT is interesting because Apple occasionally updates it. And when they update it, they push out new signatures. Now, Apple is completely untransparent about these signatures. And Apple probably has more insight into the malware threat landscape on macOS than anybody else, right? Than any other antivirus company, because they basically see all these probably infections. They might be collecting some anonymous metrics, but they have good insight into the Mac ecosystem. I know they subscribe to different malware feeds. They're probably really plugged into other companies that are monitoring stuff. So Apple likely knows more about Mac malware than anybody else in terms of what's out there, new malware that's infecting the systems. So what they do is they take in, say, they find out there's a new Mac implant that's targeting Mac customers. And nobody else knows about this, right? None of the antivirus companies, hasn't been in the news. Patrick's not tweeting about it. They get that, they analyze it. And then if it's widespread enough, what they will do is they will develop a pretty standard antivirus signature, package that into an update, and then push out that update. And the theory is seamlessly and transparently now, Mac users will be protected from this new threat. So Apple's stoked. They basically said, okay, hey, we've thwarted this threat. Our users are secure. But in my opinion, that's still somewhat problematic because a lot of times the signatures they push out are very specific. So if the malware is tweaked even a little bit, it can bypass that. Also, they don't tell the antivirus community or security researchers who might have valuable input or might want to develop their own more robust signatures for their users. So what we've done at Digita is we figured out a way to basically monitor for these updates. And then when Apple releases an update, we programmatically analyze the system to figure out what new signatures they've added. And the goal is for us then to say, oh, Apple just pushed out a new version of this malware protection. We analyze the signatures and see what's new. And then we can, try to find more information, ask our friends in the antivirus companies, maybe ask Apple. Generally, it doesn't work out that well, but what I want to briefly show you is the process we can do that. So we have a little email that goes out that basically detects when a new version of MRT is submitted. And we also have a link because this is downloaded. This is pushed out to all the Mac systems. So you can also monitor your Mac for this as well. So if you go to this URL, it's going to download the latest version of MRT config. I've actually already downloaded that. And now what we will do is we will open this package. Normally the system would download this package and install it, and then your MRT would have the latest information. So I believe I can pull up a new terminal window. And if I open up a new Finder window, all my files, there's the exploit. Oh my God. We're not going to look in there. We can open MRT with a program called Suspicious Package. And I really like Suspicious Package because what it does, and let's just grab the URL for that. Suspicious Package. Here we go. And I'll post this link here. If you're doing any malware analysis, and the malware is coming to you in a PKG file, this is a great utility because what it can do is it can analyze a PKG file for you without actually executing or mounting the PKG. Now you can do this from the command line as well with like PKG util/expand or something, but I really like this UI component, and we'll show you why in a second. So what I've done is I've opened this MRT config PKG file in the utility. Just make sure we can see this. And we can see, it's a little hard to see. I don't think I can make this bigger, unfortunately. But we can see various information about the PKG that this utility has gathered. It says it's signed by Apple Software Updater. Tells us it runs a bunch of scripts. So we can click on the script tab and we can see what this PKG will do. Now, generally for malware, there will be a PKG file that's probably a legit application that the malware has infected and perhaps injected some extra scripts. So what I like to do is I like to open the malicious PKG file with this utility. Again, this is not running anything, so this is kind of safe to access. And then I look what the scripts are doing, and a lot of times I can see what the malware is going to do. Sometimes, though, the malware is actually in the binary, so we have to dump the files. And also, in this case of MRT, the updates are actually packaged in the binary itself. That is to say, Apple pushes out a new version of mrt.app every time it updates that. It's kind of interesting design, right? Normally, you think you would have the binary and the signatures would be different, so you could just push out signatures in a XML plist file or database. This is what normally antivirus products do. MRT, though, they build that directly into the binary, recompile the binary, and then have to distribute a brand new version of the binary. Not sure why they do that, but that's what they did. So using this suspicious package UI utility, which, as I mentioned, allows us to investigate the contents of PKG files, we can browse into the PKG and see what's there. In the case of MRT, we're basically just interested in the main binary, which is where those new signatures are going to be. So what we can do is we can click Export MRT to Downloads, and this will export the binary to the Downloads directory. We can then open that in a disassembler. I like to use Hopper. And we can then go to Downloads and grab that MRT. Where did it go? Actually, let's just click and drag this. How do we do this? Havana, what you doing? Open MRT. Okay, cool. Patrick downloads. Okay, awesome. So MRT, we are now disassembling the binary that Apple has distributed that has the new signatures in them. Now, this is not the easiest to analyze, and I apologize, I can't make the text bigger than this. So when we find the specific signatures, I'll copy and paste them into a text document so you can see. Okay, so we are going to look via this email. We know that a bunch of strings have been added. These are some of the old detection. They just updated the version of MRT. That's why this is seen as a new string. The old version was 36 or 35. However, right here, though, we can see a whole chunk of new detections, code, strings rather, that have been added to the system. So let's look at what macOS 8526 is. So what we can do is we can come over to Hopper, and what we'll do is we'll click on the Stir Strings tab, and we can search for that string. A little hard to see, apologize, but I will copy and paste this chunk of code into a text edit document so we can see that. Text edit, new. Oh. Okay, it's a little bigger. Make sure we can see this. So these are the embedded strings that are in the new version of Apple's MRT utility. And we can see that, we scroll down to the bottom, yes, there's that macOS 35846E4 string that was added. So this was added to the latest version of MRT, was not in previous versions. And if we scroll up, we can see here is the signature that Apple uses. So they've classified this as family 35846E4. Unfortunately, Apple just uses random numbers. They don't say this is a variant of Genio, Fruit Fly. They just make up a number. So this is a little problematic because this gives us no insight into exactly what the system is doing, right? If we Google this string, we get 0 hits. So it's like, oh, that sucks, right? Boom. Wait, let's not Google all of that. Let's just Google that string. Okay, hang with me for a sec. Oh, I lied. Well, there's like a random string, but this is nothing related to the actual malware. For example, if we go back to the macOS string and Google that, no hits. So this is kind of annoying because this either means this is a brand new piece of malware, which is likely, but it also means that Apple's naming convention, they haven't shared information with other antivirus companies, et cetera, So there's no insight into what this malware is, unfortunately. If we come back to the strings, though, we can see that this is what they're kind of looking for. These are the bytes. These are the actual strings that they are likely looking for. Now, I believe this string might not be, how do I say? Well, maybe it is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is something that the program adds, like this underscore here, because it's written in Swift, or if it's actually part of what they are looking for. My guess is I have no idea. But we can see they are looking for things in this malware, for example, something that says browser Safari, browser Chrome. And then there's references to script 0, script 2, script 11, script 12. So if I had to guess, I would guess that Apple, let me just move this up so we can see, has looked at the malware and determined that there are these strings within the malware that are unique to the malware. So what they can do is they can scan files on the file system that are likely in a certain directory as well. They probably, they don't scan the entire file system, but they probably say, okay, this is an application that's stored in maybe /library or maybe even /application. Maybe it's a malicious browser extension that's stored in the browser extension folder, the browser plugin folder. So what they'll do is then they'll scan for these strings. So browser Safari, script 01, 012. So sometimes we as security researchers get lucky and these strings have hits on Google. I haven't Googled these yet. I doubt these do because something like script 12 is so generic. There's probably a bunch of random hits that isn't going to give us access. What we can maybe do is hop over to VirusTotal and search on there. Been signed out of that. You know what? I'm not gonna, I'm not actually gonna sign in because I'll have to type my password, and bad to type passwords while you're live streaming. Okay, I've actually already looked for the string on VirusTotal, didn't see it. I will dig more. But in this case, we're kind of now stuck because all we have are these strings. We know that there's this new malware that's out there. We know Apple has named it macOS 35846E4. We know that their signature is looking for files named script 11, script 12, script 01. And perhaps there's other files or strings within the malware that reference that, say browser Safari or browser Chrome. Based on this, I would guess it's probably a new variant of adware. This is mostly what Apple updates MRT for. And also references to said browser, browser Safari. This is likely something that is perhaps trying to see what browsers you have on your system, maybe steal your cookies, inject ads, etc., etc. But MRT is because Apple doesn't share information about what it's doing, reverse engineering or analyzing it is kind of the only way currently for us to figure out what Apple is pushing out in terms of new signatures. In like an ideal world where we're all like holding hands and singing Kumbaya, like Apple would like email security researchers and say, hey, we detected this new malware. It's spreading in Asia via these infected applications. Here's the signature we're using. Perhaps add these to your antivirus products or your scanners as well to make sure all Mac users are secure against this threat. But Apple, in their infinite wisdom, does not believe that that is the best approach, and they probably have their reasons. So we're stuck with reverse engineering MRT. Oftentimes, it does give us more valuable information. This update, we're basically left knowing that, yes, there's a new Mac malware specimen out there. These are some of the strings that are embedded in it. So what I'll likely do is go and start searching through VirusTotal, ping my friends at the antivirus company and say, hey, look, have you seen any of, is there a new piece of Mac adware out there that contains, these strings? And eventually, maybe it'll pop up. Had luck. Sometimes we never know. There's still signatures in, if we come back to here, in MRT that I have no idea what they point to. So, maybe one day, the mysteries will be solved. But, it's Apple. They don't really chat about this a lot. So that's MRT. Again, it's always running on your system, and Apple updates it every few months. And when they push out an update, it's really interesting to reverse engineer because you are able to oftentimes find out information. The last thing I want to mention about this is, and I just noticed this, it's one of my prouder moments. You can see there's a signature for Mami, M-A-M-I. And they've named it Mami. And in there, you can see they have these IP addresses. Mami is a piece of Mac adware that I was the first one to analyze, which means I was able to name it. So I decided to call it Mami because embedded in the malware was a class named Mami. And when I blogged about it, there was no MRT detections. A few weeks later, Apple pushed out this detection and stuck with the name I chose, Mami. So I'm kind of stoked about this because security researchers being able to name a malware is kind of like a very exciting thing for us. We don't get out a lot. So yeah, that's the thing. So that kind of wraps up the brief discussion on MRT. If you're a security researcher, keep an eye on when Apple pushes out updates to it and look at what they've added because, as I mentioned, a lot of times they will add signatures for new Mac malware sometimes they're the only ones that know about that. So it's a way for us as external security researchers to glean information about what Apple knows, even though Apple doesn't necessarily want us to know. Cool. So that's MRT. So I'm just going to close this. And one last thing. MRT is stored in, and we can see this by looking at suspicious package, in system library core services mrt.app. Let me just post that up here. Where did the terminal want to go? ls/system library course services mrt.app. So that's where it lives. So you can keep an eye on that. If we look at the current version, MRT app contents info.plist, we can see we're up to version 1.39. So this was the most recent version that Apple pushed out. If you have auto updates enabled on your system, this will get automatically updated anytime Apple pushes out an update. You won't have to reboot the system or anything. So it's transparent to the majority of Mac users. But as security researchers, good to keep an eye on this and do some analysis to figure out what new malware signatures Apple has added. Because again, oftentimes they are known only to Apple. So MRT, check it out.